spot that you drop me.
89.9 KMOJ, the People Station, Twin Cities. It's Glam Life Kim right now. It's 8 after the 1 o'clock hour on Wednesday, July the 8th, and it is time for Minneapolis 360. And I have one of my favorite people in the Twin Cities on the phone, Mr. Anthony Taylor. How are you today?
I am good, sis. How you doing today? It's always good to hear your voice as we get on this show together and talk about, the stuff we need to talk about. So it's good
That's
to hear you.
right.
You doing okay?
I'm awesome. Thank you. How are you?
I'm well. I came back from a much needed vacation, so
Yes.
I am back and glad to be here as always. Again, Minneapolis. This is Anthony Taylor. This is Minneapolis 360. I am the African American Community Specialist for the city. And again, I want to thank everybody who's listening today to our show, as we've always done in the last 2 years, really bring topics and issues to light that's happening in our community, to give you information, to be able to folks to activate their community and really respond to what's going on. And what we have been witnessing in our city is just downright tragic violence that's been happening throughout our city. It seems like on a daily basis, there's tragedy, there's gunplay, there's murders, there's shootings. So I want to bring back a guest today who's been on our show before, and she is the perfect person to talk about what's going on in the city. She's an expert in this topic. She's been doing a lot of great work in the city of Minneapolis for years. Sasha Cotton, the Office of Violence Prevention Director for the city of Minneapolis, and also bringing our guest with her today, Jamil Jackson, is the Executive Director of Change Equals Opportunity, to talk about some of the violence that's happening in our communities. What are some of the things that her departments are offering? Talk about some partnerships that she has in the communities. She's very well connected in the city of Minneapolis, and I am always glad to hear from Sasha Cotton. So, Sasha Cotton, welcome to Minneapolis 360. Thanks for coming back today.
Thanks, Anthony. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, even when it's some really challenging times that we're going through as a city, community, and the Office of Violence Prevention. Glad to be here.
And I'm glad you're here, Sasha. And let's get right to it, because obviously what is going on in the city is just a tremendous tragedy with the violence that's happening. Talk about this difficult time that's been happening in these times in the city.
You know, Anthony, as you said earlier, things have been really challenging, and there's a lot of tragedy going on in the community around the issue of violence. It feels like, we're looking at three intersecting pandemics right now. We've got the pandemic of COVID, obviously, and then we have the pandemic of community violence and the pandemic of racial injustice. And so our community is right at the epicenter of being on the downward end of all three of those things. I think COVID, being the first epidemic that we readily identify in 2020, people were feeling really, isolated, shut in. A lot of people lost their jobs. We know that there were a lot of releases from prisons and from jails as a result of not wanting to over-confine people with COVID. And so I think that created just a real intense sentiment of discomfort and crisis already. And then you layer on top of that the incident with George Floyd's death, and watching, the incident on live TV happen right here in our community over and over again. And then the unrest that followed really focused on racial injustice and people lifting their voices up, most of whom peaceful protesters. Obviously, we know we had a small number of people who really destroyed property and really created havoc in our city. And so the three things have just really made for the perfect storm. And now we find ourselves, like many cities after unrest, dealing with significant upticks in shooting violence. And it is just tragic. And in the Office of Violence Prevention, our hearts just go out to all of the victims and the families who are experiencing this violence. And we are working as hard and as fast as we can to try to mobilize resources and come up with some strategies that are going to bring peace to our community.
And it really is sad, because obviously and you said it brilliantly, with so many different multiple pandemics, it just makes this situation obviously much harder for folks dealing with these violence in the city. And with your department, Sasha, with all the initiatives that you have and all of the great work that you do and continue to do, what makes your department, your approach to violence prevention unique in the city of Minneapolis?
Well, the city of Minneapolis has been thinking about violence as a public health issue, particularly with young people, for over a decade. That being said, the Office of Violence Prevention didn't come into fruition until 2019. It was established in the 2018 budget, but really the work of organizing an office didn't start until 2019. And I think what makes us unique is that we really, like these other pandemics, try to look at violence that same way, that if we know that violence is like a virus or a contagious disease, that people can catch it, that like by being exposed, by being around it, it makes you more likely to get sick from the violence and also potentially become violent yourself, then we also know we can treat it, that we can come up with treatment strategies that we may, like with COVID, eventually be able to find even like quote unquote, a vaccine that protects and insulates people from this virus of violence. And so we really try to focus on strategies and programs that upstream, early in life, early in on the problems, we can address the violence as soon as we start to see the signs and symptoms. But then also, just like a virus, if you're already sick, we've got to treat the early symptoms as quickly as we can to try to get those things under control. And unfortunately, we still have people who are very ill and dying from this virus. And so we've got to work with families and communities and individuals that we call, in the tertiary part of our work. So those are people who are experiencing the violence in an ongoing way. And we've got to be able to work with that relatively small number of people overall in Minneapolis, but it's overwhelmingly Black and brown communities that are represented in that box. And we've got to be able to provide services and resources that help them heal and move forward after these repeated experiences with violence, which is really challenging and tricky, but so very necessary, especially in these times that we're facing right now.
We are talking with Sasha Cotton, Director of the Office of Violence Prevention here in the city of Minneapolis, talking about some of the things that are happening in our city around violence. And I'm really glad you said it's a virus, it's a sickness, because it can be healed and can be treated, Sasha. And that's a great point that folks need to hear. One of the things that I love about you and your office is that you do so much partnering with community-based organizations in the city to promote safe and healthy communities along a continuum. So upfront, in the thick, and during the aftermath. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. We think it's important not to just wait until the violence is, mounting up, that we have to be doing what people would traditionally think of as prevention and addressing what we think of as the root causes of violence. So racism and limited economic opportunities, community divestment, and economic disconnection. We know that poor housing opportunities and unstable homes all can really be contributing factors to violence outcomes. And so we try to do policy work and even some programming work in that area of upfront. So we want to make sure that our young people and our families have all the things that they need to be successful, because we know when they have those things, they're less likely to be involved with violence as a victim or a perpetrator. In the thick is really what a lot of people would think of as traditional intervention. When we see the signs and symptoms of something, we want to get right to it and begin to work with those individuals, those communities, those families to address the problem right as it's beginning, because we know that early intervention is the best way to reduce the ongoing pattern that can manifest with violence. And then the aftermath is really, after the violence has happened. And unfortunately, in our community, Anthony, we see that far too often, that, we're not just seeing a person who experiences violence, or a person, a family, an individual who's experiencing violence once, but often it's an ongoing pattern. And so that's where we really start to see these deep issues around trauma and hopelessness, because when you're experiencing violence and people in your community are it's normalized in many of our communities, particularly communities of color. We've got to have programs that do that deep dive with families and individuals, focusing on not only the activity that creates the violence, but also really addressing the trauma that we know experiences with violence as a victim or a perpetrator create. And we know that victimization and perpetration are connected. So who's a victim today may be a perpetrator tomorrow, and vice versa. And so we can't focus on pointing fingers and blame, although people have to be accountable and responsible when they do harm. But we really have to figure out ways to wrap our arms around people and get to that root of the problem in the aftermath to make sure that those patterns of violence don't continue over a lifetime.
Yes. Oh my God. That is what people needed to hear. I really believe, Sasha. This is Glam Life Kim, and I wanted to just ask you, how can our community get involved in these programs? Or if we notice there's a child or a person or, someone who's experiencing some of these, so to say, symptoms, how can they get involved, or how can they, or how can we reach out to you guys so that we can make sure that they are enrolled in these programs?
Absolutely. So folks can reach out to the office at, you can reach me at the city's office at 612-673-2729. That's our direct extension. But we also are really excited about the fact that the city has a website now focused on our office and the programs and projects that we're a part of. And so folks can just Google Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention, and you should be able to get to our new landing page. It just launched late last week, so we're very excited that now people can find us on the web and be able to explore all of our programs. We know that we've been around for a little while, but we haven't had that web presence, and so we're really excited about that, to be able to share that with people. We also are looking forward to launching a Facebook page in the next few weeks, and so we're really trying to enhance the ways that we can communicate with the community at large.
Awesome. Can you give them that website one more time, please, or the information where they can Google it?
Sure. I think the easiest way for folks to reach us is just to Google Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention, and that should, with a Google search, bring you to a prompt to get to our webpage. And the phone number to the office is 612-673-2729.
Wonderful.
And Sasha, I'm so glad, and I was actually on your website yesterday, so I'm so glad that the city finally dedicated to make sure that you had a site that folks can go to. As we got a few more minutes left, and I want to bring in Jamil. Sasha, talk about some of the other programs that you provide for folks in the city.
Sure. So I think some of the things that are important to talk about are our Coaching Boys into Men project. It's a project run by April Graves from our office, and she's working really closely with high schools across the north side, so North, Patrick Henry, and Edison. Obviously, some of that work has had to be paused because of COVID, but I know that she's still actively engaged with those school populations, even just virtually, and engaging with staff and students to particularly work with young men who are athletes, because we know how much influence our student athletes can really have. And this curriculum is focused on teaching them how to have healthy relationships and how to be healthy bystanders. We know our community is overrepresented when it comes to domestic incidents, and a lot of that is about not having the tools to be in healthy relationships, healthy, intimate relationships. And so that's really important work happening across the high schools in North Minneapolis. We also have our Inspiring Youth program, which is focused on young people in middle school. We want to get to them again, like I said before, as early as possible. So this is a program for young people before they ever get into a court system, to try to provide them with case management and resources and mentorship. So families and school advocates, counselors can refer kids to this program when they see those first signs that maybe a kid is losing interest in school, or maybe they have an older sibling that's already been into some trouble. And so that's kind of our, in the thick of it work, the work that we can do right when we see the issues. And then our Next Step program and our hospital-based work, I think, is also really important. So we're doing 24-hour-a-day crisis management in our hospitals at the Trauma One centers, both at HCMC and North Memorial. We've got teams who are both of those hospitals working with folks who come in because they've been seriously injured because of violence. And we know that through the wonders of modern medicine, people are often stitched up and sent home very quickly, even from relatively serious injuries. But no one's often taking the time to ask them, what happened? Is it safe for you to go home? Do you have a home to go to? And no one's working with them around those trauma issues and those long-term root causes after a serious incident. So that's what Next Step is designed to do, to be there right when someone's coming into the hospital and talking to them about what happened, but also mitigating that retaliatory violence. We know that so often hurt people, and so people want to retaliate. They want to, as we say, get some clapback when they've been injured, and we just know that that leads to more violence and escalations of violence. And so Next Step is both focused on that individual victim, but also on mitigating that retaliatory violence. And so those are some of the programs that we're working on right now that are doing some really important but limited work. We're always worried about scale in the Office of Violence Prevention just because we don't always have the capacity to reach everyone in every situation, but the work that they're doing in the various programs is so important.
That is great information, and they can Google Minneapolis violence prevention, and all that information will come up on the website, Sasha.
That's right. Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention with a Google search should get you right to our page.
Thank you, Sasha, and I appreciate you being here today. You continue to do great work in the community, so I appreciate you giving listeners in the city this information. It was really helpful, and keep doing what you're doing, sis, and I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you, sir.
I want to bring in Jamil Jackson. Another project that is happening with the Office of Violence Prevention is GVI, so Group Violence Intervention. Jamil Jackson is the Executive Director of Change Equals Opportunity. He definitely is a part of GVI. So, Brother Jamil, thank you for being on the show today. Can you talk a little bit about what GVI is all about?
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on, Anthony. So GVI is, as you said, it's the group violence intervention, and its design is to reduce street groups involved violence and homicide. And our strategy is to reduce pure dynamics that promote that violence, right? By trying to get these guys to see their life with value, trying to get them to understand that we're all interconnected, related, we're all family, we're all neighbors. And there are other ways to solve our issues than violence, really. And so what we do is we try to get into the heart of the streets and meet some of these guys and use their peer pressure as they want change to get others to change by offering some resources. So how CEO is connected to this is I actually run a few businesses, and through CEO, we hire some of these guys to actually work on some of my job sites so that we can provide them with income and some stability, which is a true deterrent from street violence and a way for them to see their lives in a different light.
And so when you talk about GVI, when did this start? And you talked a little bit about your your organization. When did this start? And maybe just give more detail into your organization, because I'm loving everything that I'm hearing, right? So shout out your program.
GVI was brought to us in about 2018, and it's a collective partnership between community-based organizations, the Office of Violence Prevention, and law enforcement. And the purpose is to use community-based organizations as resources to prevent guys going to the other side to law enforcement. So together we come up with a collective understanding of who these guys are and who needs to hear this message. And then we provide them with a message of, we need to stop what's going on, but we're not just asking you to stop for the sake of stopping. We're also offering you some resources that allow you to change your lifestyle and change who you are. And so it's definitely by choice, because we don't want them to feel forced, right, for this change. We want it to be holistic. And it kind of revolves that way, right? So through these meetings, these guys share the message. They go back to their community and their friends and their peers, and they talk about the opportunity for life change. And then they make the phone call to our staff member, Jerome, who does the intakes and the case management. And from there, we try to figure out what are the barriers, what are the needs that are hindering them from living a better life and being a better man to their families and their communities. from there, it's resources, transportation, help with resumes, food vouchers, name it, we provide it because we want to eliminate every barrier possible, right? So there's no reason to turn back to that lifestyle.
We are talking with Jamil Jackson, Executive Director of Change Equals Opportunity. And Brother Jamil, one of the things that really bother me about mainstream media is how they shape the narrative of our youth and our community with a lot of sad stories and really don't share or shoot a spotlight on the success of these organizations and really the positive stories that happen in these organizations and the work that you do. So, and I try to work hard to try to reshape the narrative on that as much as I can. Tell us some of the great stuff that you've seen, the experiences that you've worked with the people in your community about some success that really resonated with you. And I know you got plenty, because I know there are, but so
it's a
share
daily
one.
thing for me, right? So my organization CEO has been in existence for about 12 years now, and we do everything from basketball leagues to college trips to everything. This work with GVI is important to me because it brings in another level of individuals, meaning the street kids that aren't really able to get to some of these services, whether it be boundaries of territory or just don't have the exposure and the knowledge of what's going on. And so being able to go into the streets and walk and talk and meet really allows exposure to a lot of these organizations. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword, to be honest with you, right? We have to understand that mainstream media plays its role. But within community, we have to continue to do a great job of building each other up and supporting each organization because we all bring something special to the table, right? I don't consider my organization to be any different or any better than any of the other organizations out there. There are kids that belong to all of us, and they need all of us in our own respective right for them to become successful.
Absolutely.
So even like, the opportunity to be on this show, right? This isn't just for me or GVI. This is for all of us as a collective. It just so happens that we're the speaker for the collective today.
I appreciate you, brother. Well, how can people get in contact with you and give folks information about your organization?
Well, I through the Office of Violence Prevention, the information that Sasha gave you, but also I can be reached at my phone number directly at 612-730-3581. Again, 612-730-3581. And CEOChangeEqualsOpportunity.com is in the making. It should be up by next week.
Awesome.
Appreciate you being on the show today, Jamil.
My pleasure, man.
We have just had a great conversation with Jamil Jackson, Sasha Cotton about some of the work and partnerships that the Office of Violence Prevention is doing in the city of Minneapolis. So I want to thank them both. Kim, real quick, just to wrap up this show, what are some of your thoughts about the information that was shared today?
I think it's great because a lot of time our community just doesn't really know what's out there, right? They don't know that there are programs that can help. We see youth, we see adults, we see people going through things every day, and we just don't know where to go or how to get help. And so I think that it's awesome that we bring these organizations to life. I love what they're doing, and I hope that it's really helping. And I hope for those of you who just heard this show, please share this information with your friends or your family members or anyone that you know that could use it.
Absolutely. And, I've been working in the city for almost 3 years, and I can tell you one thing. I am a big Sasha Cotton fan, and the work that she does in the city and the partnership that she's developed. So I am definitely glad she came on to share this information today. So please, Minneapolis, if you're able to get on the website of the Office of Violence Prevention, do so. It's a lot of great programs on here, and definitely some very good partnerships, as you can tell with Jamil Jackson and some of the work that his organization is doing. So please, because we have to definitely make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our children in whatever way we can to stop this unnecessary violence that's happening in our community. So I want to thank them both. I want to thank Minneapolis for being able to tune in today. It's always a pleasure to be with you every other Wednesday. We'll continue to bring you valuable information and resources on how to help your city, our city, and be able to activate community. And again, always to Minneapolis, please stay safe. COVID is still happening. I usually give an update with the numbers on our show. I didn't do that today specifically because I wanted to make sure that Sasha was able to have most of this platform. But please stay safe, wear your mask, physical distance, and just take care of yourselves and your loved ones. So I will see you next week, actually 2 weeks. This is Minneapolis 360. Take care, Minneapolis.
All right. One love, kings and queens. Until next time, on the way, Zany K.